Okay, so good afternoon to all of you. My name is Stefan Emmert. I'm from Baselaunch / Basel, and I'm gonna guide you through today's event. I'm super excited to have so many of you joining. We have over 400 people registered from all over the world. And I'm equally excited that today from Roche, we have representatives from all the relevant activities accessing external innovation, being it with Carsten from the External Innovation Group, to Louis from Roche Partnering, and then finally Carol from the Roche Venture Fund. And I'm really looking forward to a very lively event today. And then at the ending, we'll also have some time for Q&A. Now, before we start, some operational things. So what we will do afterwards is we'll guide you through our presentations. Please feel free to ask questions directly. You can see on the right, clicking on stage, there's a box called Q&A. Please ask all your questions. Please type all your questions into the Q&A box. If you see a question that you want to ask and someone else has already asked it, please simply like it instead of posting it again. This will then help us to sort through the questions in the ending. And with that, we're ready to go. So what I would like to do now is I want to spend a few minutes to introduce you to Basel, the organization running Baselaunch, and afterwards zoom more into Baselaunch, what we do and how we operate. And then basically we'll hand it over to Louis from Roche Partnering. And what Basel really wants to do is create the Swiss business and innovation hub of the future. So we are an organization with many activities. We are heavily focused on therapeutic innovation. We also have initiative in healthcare innovation as well as in production technologies. We are also running an investment promotion arm, and we are also operating a tech park, the Switzerland Innovation Park Basel area, which is basically right now putting up a massive new building, and which will become operational in roughly a year, where very small companies from life science backgrounds up to very established companies will find a home. But today it's purely on Baselaunch, so I will now not go much more into details about Basel area, but focus on Baselaunch, which is an incubator we are running out of Basel area. And the aim there is really to find very early projects, to help them get up and running, enable them to become independently operate and finance companies that can flourish on themselves. Now, as you might have already guessed, we are based in Basel, and we would argue that in continental Europe, and probably in all of Europe, Basel is the best place to put a biotech company, to found it, to grow it, and basically create fully operational biotechs. And I think one number shows that quite nicely. In the last few years, over 5 billion in financings have went into companies, it's public and private financings into companies based out of Basel. We're actually more approaching 6 billion right now with the recent going public of Roivant, but then also Vectiv Bio. And there's also a few additional venture rounds which have not yet been announced. I think there's going to be coming out some great news on that topic as well. So to sum it up, we really believe this is a great place to grow a company. You can also see that represented in the scheme on the right side. We have everything from the very small to the very large organizations. We also have a very strong research base, academic research. And all this together, we believe really is the perfect place to nurture new biotech companies. And from Baselaunch, we can really tap deeply into this network and make it work for the companies we support. On the other side, we know that biopharma is very global activity, so we're quite well plugged into the global biopharma community and can also access that one. Now, as I said already, Baselaunch itself, the aim is to de-risk very early science and help building these companies from scratch, such that they then can raise venture capital financing, do collaborations, and flourish on themselves. To do so, we can provide up to 500,000 in convertible loan financing, and we are very proud to have set Baselaunch up not in isolation, but in partnership with currently 6 companies, one of them being Roche. The other one is PB Pureas Bioventures. We also have J&J, CSL Behring, Roivant Sciences, and Bridge Bio, which is a Korean biotech company. And to this setup, this enables us actually to put up the convertible loan financing. But even more important is we have deep access to the know-how of our partners, and this really helps us evaluate the projects we're looking at. Because when we start working with them, what we really try to do is figure out in quite great details where are the gaps and what should we finance to further de-risk the science, and just generate a data package which then enables them to go on their own. On the other side, we really spend a lot of time also building out these companies from scratch. So we help basically incorporate. We usually get involved in licensing the IP. There's a lot of discussions with us and the companies and our partners, but also with the help of further consultants, and typically to, for example, discuss which indications and the de-risking strategy and all these things. And where we're also very active is really build out the teams of these companies. We really try to bring in people with development know-how, or people who know how to run a biotech company, who know how to finance it, either in board positions at the beginning or directly in executive roles. Because we believe nowadays this is the only way to successfully start biotech companies, if you have people with experience working alongside the academic inventors and founders together as a team. We can also provide access to labs and infrastructure if needed. I will come back to that one in a second. But so far, just looking backwards a bit, we financed the first companies early 2018. We have so far 13 companies in our portfolio, and the ones we financed in the first 2 years went on to raise around 250 million in venture financing from US and European venture funds. There's more which are not announced, but which will come soon out. And on top of that, we are also seeing collaborations and deals ongoing from our portfolio with pharma companies. Again, this is not announced. One company is sold, and the newer ones we have financed and are financing right now, also are well on track to further increase this number. So we're quite happy how it went so far, and we try to build on that one together with help of all our partners and all the relevant players in this ecosystem. Now, coming back to the infrastructure, we have a home basically. We have two homes, if you will. One is, as I already mentioned, the Switzerland Innovation Park. The other one is the Technology Park Basel area. And both tech parks can offer shared and private office and lab space, which comes fully furnished, and a variety of other services. Projects that we support through Base Launch can, for an extended period of time, have access actually free of charge to various infrastructures in these two parks, and we're really happy to have this collaboration ongoing, because it also enables the companies we work with to really kickstart their operations. Now, as I already mentioned before, we are not running this in isolation. Besides the partners I mentioned, we have a string of additional partnerships from CROs, law firms, but also strong backing from the public to run this, and obviously it's run all out of Basel area. So we're very happy that we could attract all these partners, and it helps us tremendously working with the companies and supporting them on their journey to get up and going. And with that, I'm coming to an end about Basel area and Base Launch. What I would like to do now is I would like to bring up Luis from Roche Partnering. I will let then Luis introduce himself, and then basically the stage is yours, Luis. And I will disappear as soon as you share your screen.
Good, thank you, Stefan. I hope everybody can hear me. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to congratulate Stefan and his colleagues at Base Launch for the very good work they've done over the past few years. We have been involved with Base Launch already since a few years, and it is really a testament to what they've been able to do over these years in terms of raising new companies, raising the amount of money these companies have raised, And this is a lot to do with the initial work they do by triaging and helping these companies get ready to present to us in the selection panel. With this, what I'm going to tell you today is a bit more, I hope I will give you a bit more insight on how we operate in Roche Pharma Partnering. Few first slides introducing Roche. Maybe most of you already know Roche, but maybe just an update on where we are today. So 58 billion in sales in 2020, over 100,000 employees. We are the #1 investor in healthcare. Remember our two divisions are pharmaceuticals and diagnostics. We were involved very early on with biotech through our investment in Genentech, which has given us really the very pioneering entry into the field of antibodies and cancer treatments, as well as ophthalmology. And we are still benefiting today in the area of multiple sclerosis, for instance. I will keep it short on this slide and move immediately to the next one. It is important to mention for the general public that we are a decentralized organization, so we do not have one head of R&D. Instead, we do have 3 independent large research organizations, the legacy Genentech organization and the legacy Roche are 2 separate research and early development. So the red stands for research and early development. The heads of those 2 groups report directly to our CEO. In addition, we have Shuga in Japan, and we have independently run companies which have kept their own brand, Spark Therapeutics, Foundation Medicine, and Flatiron. We then bring it all together when our candidates move into late stage. This is when we truly become global. We run global clinical, large-scale, late-stage clinical trials, as well as manufacturing and commercialization is all done on a worldwide basis. The importance of partnering is illustrated here in this very simple slide. So around half of the pipeline we have now involves some sort of partnership, and of the 40% of the sales that pharma generated, around 40% were originated in inventions that were not done here at Roche. This is an overview of the latest deals we've done, and what this illustrates here is primarily 2 things: that we do deals at different stages of development, spanning from early stage to late stage, then research technologies, and then digital and personalized healthcare. We are also very curious about different modalities, and Karsten Kroll, my colleague in Piret, will later speak to this in a bit more detail, but just to illustrate down here that we have, enough products for each of these modalities. Now, let's dive deeper a bit into how we work in partnering. So first of all, we identify which are our areas of interest, and we permanently are in dialogue with our scientists to be on top of all the latest developments. It is quite usual that us in business development also attend medical and scientific conferences to stay on top of what's happening in the world. And we do attend partnering conversations and do our deals. And then we have a dedicated department, alliance management, which takes care of the partnership throughout the whole life cycle of that partnership. So here's a quick overview of how we are set up. TA stands for therapeutic area. You can see the 3 classical areas here: immunology and infectious diseases. I2, NORD stands for neuroscience, ophthalmology, and rare disease. And then oncology is self-explanatory. And then 2 other groups are the digital and PHC, as well as tech. Tech is really to do with early stage research platforms that are innovative. And here what we are looking for are obviously platforms that we do not have in-house and that can complement our discovery effort. As regards our own organization, internally we have a group of dedicated business development project leads, of which I am one of them. here in Basel, in Switzerland, to cater for the needs of PRED, and another group is based in San Francisco and caters for the needs of Genentech. And the late-stage partnering is done on an ad hoc basis. So if one of us based in Basel or in San Francisco will pick up a late-stage project, depending on their previous experience and expertise. And then there are a number of different functions that you can see here at the bottom of the slide. As alliance management, I've already mentioned. And here, maybe I should also mention asset and alliance management means the part of asset management means that we also license out. So we don't not only do license in molecules, but we also license out, and we also divest. Most of the time, what we divest are more mature products. We have a group based in Asia, and then we have commercial assessment, transaction excellence, and some other functions like finance. This will be a slide that's familiar to some of you who have been in industry long enough. It's the usual places where we go and find ideas for partnerships. Of course, we are today at the base launch event, so I should also mention that this is for us relatively new way of also accessing innovation is by supporting incubators, and it has been so far a pleasure to be involved in base launch. So what are we looking for? And this is probably one of the most important slides of this deck. Is we do define areas we are interested in, which you can call a strategy. Those areas can be mechanisms of action or can be specific diseases. We are looking for things that are new, so novel molecules. We are less interested in, say, old molecules where a scientist has found that it might work in a new indication. This is less what we do. And the priority is for molecules that can be either first in class, or when they are not first in class, that they can bring a substantial benefit over the first in class and therefore be the best in class. We look for biology, for a good understanding of the biology of the molecule. So that is, be prepared when you come to Roche to be able to explain how you think your molecule is working and what you're targeting and what evidence you have for that. We work very, very closely with our scientists, and when we do due diligence, we usually involve teams of people, which can be between 10 and 30 people, depending on the stage of the project, that span all the usual areas in preclinical research through to clinical, regulatory, and manufacturing, and commercial if it's a later stage opportunity. So out of this, you see that the funnel is relatively strict. We cast the net very wide, so 2,500 opportunities, of which result 92 different agreements. Most of them will be in areas where we are already present in terms of modalities, so we'll do small molecules or antibodies, but we have in the last few years, and it's a tradition since a long time, always explored new modalities as well. As said in the beginning, antibodies, for instance, we were one of the first in big pharma to be involved. So again, this is a bit of a recap, but with a bit more detail and a bit more illustrating what I mean with what we're interested in and what we're not interested in. On the left-hand side, high disease burden, novel targets, potential for first or best in class, and novel modalities. What we're not interested in is in a new application of aspirin or a new syrup for cough or animal health. We look for solid IP, so intellectual property, good patents, recent patents, and clear biology. So I think I've covered most of this. Biomarker strategy is important as well. And I'm fairly close to the end of my presentation. This is a bigger overview, a more detailed overview of the areas we're interested in. This things are not written in stone and are not here forever. So these are revised periodically. And of course, primarily, we are also interested in great science. So we will review opportunities outside of these fields if you believe that there is a scientific breakthrough in an area which we are not, which is not on this list. We will be willing to listen to you as well. And in forums like Base Launch, this is also part of what we hope to learn is other areas that are not here, but where there is significant innovation. So with this, I think I will stop. I think I've been instructed not to. I don't need to stop sharing, and then Stefan can pass on presentation to the next speaker.
Yes. So Luis, many thanks for that one. I will now remove you, and for the others, Luis will then come back at the ending that we can answer questions. And with this, what I would like to add now is I am going to bring Carsten from the External Innovation Group to the stage. Carsten, thanks for joining. Nice having you here. I will now remove myself, and please quickly introduce yourself and then zoom into your presentation. With that, I'm handing over to you.
Thanks, Stefan. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really fun to be here. Maybe I start with introducing myself. So I'm Carsten. I studied chemistry, so I'm a chemist by training. I did my PhD here in Basel at the university, and then did a postdoc in Boston for some time, and started at the Roche around 6 years ago, was working as a medicinal chemist for a few years, and quite recently fully focused on external innovation. So within PRED, Luis had introduced this concept of the different research units to you. So within PRED, I'm in therapeutic modalities with a focus on small molecules. And let me try sharing my screen. I'll turn off the camera for the presentation. So I want to give you a brief, I think this is working, yes. Brief introduction to therapeutic modalities within PRED. So we work really with a variety of modalities in-house and with external partners. And you see the number 4 here, so 4 in-house modalities. This really depends on what you count as a modality. So it used to be easier with small molecules and antibodies. Nowadays, it is a very dynamic landscape. It's changing quickly, and as an organization, we are flexibly adding what makes sense for us. And we work in 5 innovation centers, mostly in Europe, but also in Shanghai and China. And we are supporting a very rich portfolio across 6 broad therapeutic areas that that Luis introduced to you. And I just want to highlight that we are one of the few big pharma organizations that is also still committed to antibiotics. So we have a lot ongoing there in the infectious disease space as well. Within therapeutic modalities or within PRED in general, I want to highlight that we really have a fascination for the science and the underlying, for the science of the underlying diseases. And we are acting very patient-centric. So an unmet medical need and the ability to come up with transformative treatments is really the most important argument for us to engage in new projects. And we do this by embracing new technologies and ideas to really invent novel medicine. So we are really open for innovation, and we favor a rigorous scientific debate, and this is much more important than a particular process to us. Nowadays, we experiment quite a bit as an organization with novel self-organizational team models, leaner governance through more empowered teams. So for me personally, it's really a great place to perform science. So let me introduce our modalities to you and how we utilize those platforms. We really remain invested and committed to conventional small molecules, and we see still great potential for this modality. We are positioned very strongly in both large molecule research, so biologics, and we are highly interested in RNA as both as a drug modality and as a drug target. We combine modalities to make them even more powerful, for example, to achieve targeted delivery. And more recently, we added gene therapy to our toolkit. And our commitment in this emerging area can be seen by our acquisition of Spark Therapeutics, which is the leading gene therapy company across discovery, development, and manufacturing. And also, we are very much interested in synthetic biology, and we are exploring this space as well. So these modalities have really proven their value by delivering many truly innovative medicines, so real firsts, as it's called here on the slide. We are extremely proud of Risdiplam, which is the first orally administered treatment for spinal muscular atrophy, which is a disease that was not treatable at all until a few years ago. And let me comment on this example a little bit more, because it's such a great example for external innovation. It was almost a decade ago that we believed in the potential to target RNA with small molecules to affect splicing. And we had the chance to license in the SMN2 small molecule splicing modifier from PTC Therapeutics, so Biotech, that they had developed in partnership with a patient organization, the SMA Foundation. And from then on, Risdiplam was jointly advanced by scientists from Roche in Basel and by PTC Therapeutics, always in close collaboration with the patient organization SMA Foundation. And now it's accessible to patients, and we are really moved to see how this impacts the life of patients and of their families. So it's really a great example. Moving on to larger molecules, to CB-satamab and faricimab, which are two great examples derived from our bispecifics antibody platform. And CB-satamab works by cross-linking tumor cells to T cells to activate T cells and also to activate T cell migration. And both of those bispecifics are currently in clinical development for solid tumors and for macular degeneration and edema. I show you here our brain shuttle molecule gantenerumab. So that's an antibody that targets amyloid plaques to treat Alzheimer's disease. And the molecule has been in clinical development before. And in this version, it's combined with it's a deliberate, targeted version of gantenerumab that is taken up by the transferrin receptor, and that allows us to achieve a roughly 10-fold higher concentration of the molecule in the brain to more efficiently clear the plaques. And the last example I want to show here is a liver-targeted locked nucleic acid. So that's the Roche proprietary format of oligonucleotides, and it's the first LNA liver-targeted immunoenhancer for hepatitis B treatment, also in the clinic currently. So I hope I've convinced you that we are very open to many different approaches and modalities, and that we really have a rich and diverse pipeline of hopefully transformative treatments. So what's next? Where do we see the need for the next enhancement, the next technology that enables a life-saving medicine? And let me briefly walk you through the different modalities or the different areas and how we think about it. So in biologics, for us, bispecific antibodies are the norm nowadays. It's an established platform. And we think that the next design cycle or the next generation builds on that. And topics like conditional activation are very important for us these days, novel formats for antibiotics, or also teaching antibodies novel mode of actions, for example. One example of accessing external innovation in this space is our partnership with Immunix, where we partnered around their externulation platform to extend the half-life of biologics, for example. For RNA-based medicines, delivery is really the big topic, because everything outside of the liver currently needs local delivery. So we are very much interested in solutions for that problem, so to say, to enhance the applicability of this modality further. And in genomic medicine, I had mentioned Spark before, and they really offer a cutting-edge platform that has the potential to revolutionize healthcare and to transform the lives of people with life-threatening conditions. And also here, delivery is really the big topic to harness the power of this modality even further. And delivery can, for example, be achieved by improved capsid formats, and we have collaboration ongoing there. We'll touch on it in a second. But also, for example, with tissue-specific promoters. So that's an area that we are interested in very much as well. So I just want to briefly touch on a collaboration around improved capsids, and that's with Dino Therapeutics. And Dino is a biotech that has built a platform to use artificial intelligence to optimize AAV capsids, to change the biodistribution of those capsids, to improve biodistribution, or to achieve certain tropisms, so tissue specificities. And we are very excited about their platform, and to really make this a success, it's a close partnership. So they bring in their proprietary expertise, and we bring in our expertise, especially on development, but also on neuroscience in general. So Dino is just one of the examples where we really build the external and internal innovation landscape around gene therapy to enhance the applicability of this great modality. And let's dive a little bit further into small molecules and what we think about their future. And you might realize, based on the fact that I'm a chemist, that I'm slightly biased. But small molecules, they still offer many benefits compared to other modalities. For example, they distribute nicely in the entire body. They can access the intracellular space, and they can be orally bioavailable, for example. So we really remain committed in this space, and we see great potential to do things with small molecules that we can't do yet today. For example, drugging undruggable targets with peptide macrocycles, or with bigger small molecules to drug protein-protein interactions. And we have ongoing collaborations in this space. A really interesting, exciting, emerging field are degraders. And we have ongoing collaborations, for example, with C4 Therapeutics and with Vividion. But we are also following closely the next wave of targeted protein degradation approaches that are, for example, employing E3 ligase independent mechanisms, or also using differentiated chemical matter for protein degradation, like molecular glues. We are thinking about more conventional small molecules. We explore novel mode of actions or novel targets, for example, through phenotypic screens, or enhancing what the target space of small molecules by targeting RNA, for example. And I just want to touch briefly, forgot to mention, more a vision these days, but thinking about intracellular space, of course, also approaches in the in the future that allow molecules that are not small molecules like biologics or antibodies to enter intracellular space. This would, of course, be super exciting and open up completely new avenues. So I just want to mention this here as a vision. And coming back to RNA targeting, recently we signed a rather broad research and development collaboration to develop RNA-targeted small molecules with Arrakis. And this covers a broad set of targets across all therapeutic areas within Roche. And for that, we are using a platform that Arrakis has built to identify and target RNA three-dimensional structures. You see them shown here in the middle of the slide, to modulate the function of proteins that would be difficult to drug on a protein level. So the idea here is to rather hit the target on the RNA level than on the protein level, when the protein itself is extremely difficult to drug by small molecules. Also here in this collaboration, we as PRED contribute significantly to advance the initially found lead molecule into actual medicines. So beyond partnerships like the one with Arrakis that I just showed, that enable us to do projects and work on targets that we were not able to work on before, we also engage in collaborations and partnerships to optimize our internal core capabilities and how we work on projects. And this could include novel assay technologies, for example, but it also could include technologies that offer formulations for enhanced bioavailability of complex molecules. And a very big topic these days in general, of course, is artificial intelligence, machine learning. And we are looking into solutions to accelerate drug discovery, or generally to use it to enhance our capabilities. And just want to very briefly touch on one example here. It's a collaboration with Reverie Labs, and they are a machine learning driven company that is pioneering the application of artificial intelligence and in the discovery and development of kinase inhibitors. And we think that's a particularly nice example of the use of artificial intelligence in drug discovery, because the kinase inhibitor space is a very data-rich environment. So there is a lot of structural information that you can build on to really train models and to use the help of computers, so to say, to aid drug discovery. And this will be used for multiple targets alongside with Roche and Genentech scientists. So it's really an engine that's plugged into ongoing projects. So it's a truly collaborative effort as well. I've talked quite a bit about biotech collaborations, and I just want to use this slide to highlight that we also have many super exciting collaborations ongoing with academic partners. And a few examples shown here, and this includes access to novel chemical matter to screen against very challenging targets, for example. It's around novel assay technologies. It's a lot of computational work ongoing as well. And typically this is happening in close collaboration with ongoing projects at Roche, but it could also be very portfolio independent, more on the basic research side of things. And I want to finish a little bit by showing this hype curve, and the example here is around the development of RNAi or antisense technology. because a constant question across the industry is really around what is a hype and what is true innovation. What is the right time to invest, to engage in emerging technology? I don't have an answer for that, to be absolutely honest, but we are thinking a lot about this question and thinking about solutions, how we can enable informed decisions or which indicators we should monitor and use to identify the right timing and when to engage. So this is more the view on the entire industry or the entire field. And maybe let me share my view on individual proposals and opportunities. So Louis had shown you this slide before, and I guess I'm one of those functional experts that he was referring to. So let me tell you what I usually look at, or what has the ability to excite me. First of all, I want to know that it's really scientifically solid and that it makes sense and it's well validated and thought through. And then there has to be a clear differentiation, and the differentiation really has to be clear in comparison to the field, what's out there. And if the differentiation is there and it's scientifically solid, then it very much in focus is really the assessment whether it brings benefits to patients and if there is an actual unmet need. So honestly, and that's my personal view, I really don't care too much about any sales predictions or so at this point. We think if there's a real benefit and if it has transformative potential, then there will be a market and the business side of things will be fine. So at this early point, it's very much focused the assessment on science and unmet medical need. What we often observe is that aspects outside of the core of the actual idea, which, for example, could be a new target or a new mode of action, that aspects outside of this core are not thought through well enough. So really early on, also think about safety, think about your therapeutic index, for example, think about in which other organs your target might play a role that you should better spare, for example. But also think about very practical aspects like manufacturing, for example. But as I had mentioned before, in a partnership, we are of course also there to help with those aspects and to advance it together. So yeah, it takes a lot to turn an idea into a drug, but I think it's really worth it. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Carsten. I will now put you into the backstage, and then after the next talk, which is from Carol, who I will bring to the stage in a second, we will also bring back Carsten and Louis to go through all the questions. And again, one thing, could you please just put the questions into the Q&A, because they're all over the place a bit, and then it gets difficult to manage. Okay, thank you, Carsten, see you soon. Okay, and with that, I am bringing up Carol Nischtelein. She is heading the Roche Venture Fund. Great to have you with us, Carol. I will hand over to you now. I will leave myself. Maybe you can say a few words about yourself, and then we get started. Thank you.
So hi, everybody. Thanks, Stefan, for inviting us to present today. My name is Carol Nischtelein. As you can probably tell, I am American, though I've been living in Basel for quite some time now. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Roche Venture Fund and also try to be very practical and give you some advice as to how to raise money, essentially. So here we go. So first, I'm going to mention the Venture Fund itself. Our mission statement is that we invest to develop commercially successful, innovative life science companies. And we focus on innovation. We're really intrigued by innovation, but innovation for innovation's sake isn't enough. It has to develop into a commercially successful product. And we would add here that makes a difference in patients' lives. We're accountable for all the equity investments made by Roche and Genentech, whether as part of a collaboration or independently. We have 750 million Swiss francs to invest. It's an evergreen fund, which means we invest off the balance sheet and return money to the balance sheet. So we don't have to go out and raise new funds every 4 or 5 years. We're located in group finance, which means we're independent of pharma or diagnostics. Our performance is judged by financial returns, no strategic components. And we have no rights unless we enter into a separate collaboration or licensing agreement. We focus on therapeutics and digital healthcare with a bit of diagnostics. We don't do medical devices. We have 41 companies in our portfolio. And as I mentioned earlier, we're committed to creating new companies that will make a difference in patients' lives. So we are split between Basel and South San Francisco. And I don't want to spend too much time on the people here because that will use up all my time. But we coordinate very closely together and we work very closely with our colleagues in South San Francisco. So what is our investment strategy? So we focus on Series A investments, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure that we are aligned with the syndicate from the very beginning, and also to influence the direction of the company. For our ownership percentage, we'd like to be at 15 to 20% at the first investment. And part of that is because we know we'll be diluted down as new money comes in. And so we still want to maintain a significant investment. And again, it's the ability to influence. For the size of the investment, our initial investment, we have a minimum of 5 million Swiss francs. And that initial investment's tied, and just by the way, for those, I understand there are people from all over the world on this call. So 5 million Swiss francs is roughly $5 million, more or less. And the initial investment's tied to the ownership percentage. If it's a small round, we invest less. If it's a large round, we invest more. But the key point here is we need to put sufficient money to work to justify the time commitment. Each of us who are doing investments can maybe have 8 to 9 companies in our personal portfolio that we're actively managing. So if you put 1 million in and you get a 10x return, that's 10 million. That sounds great. But if you could put 10 million in and get the same 10x return, that's 100 million. So obviously, the more we can put in, hopefully the more we can make. And we do have a preferred maximum of 25 million per company during the life of the investments. And that's more to reduce the exposure to any one position in the portfolio. So for therapeutics, we focus on preclinical. For digital healthcare, we focus on companies that have a clear customer need and that there's a barrier to entry, that they have something special. And that's very important because sometimes we'll see 2 or 3 companies that are doing exactly the same thing. And so we focus a lot on the barrier to entry. We are actively involved with the boards. We either have a board or a board observer seat. And we want to make an impact, obviously, but also active board participation is helpful for syndicate building. When we're getting ready to put a syndicate together, we look at who have we invested with in the past, who has been there when things, has been a good board member. The only thing we know when we make an investment is that something is going to go wrong. And you want to have people that you can work with, that are helpful, that are productive, alongside of you in your board and your syndicate. So we try to invest ahead of Roche's interest. As I mentioned earlier, our investments are made independent of pharma and diagnostics. We can make investments within the team up to 5 million. And then additional approvals are basically the group treasurer and then the CFO if it's more than 10 million Swiss francs. We have historically invested in areas independent or ahead of the Reds in pharma, so the research and development groups. We jokingly say we invest in areas of interest to Roche or which we think should be of interest to Roche. They just haven't gotten there yet. And gene therapy is a good example of that. When we invested in Innosuisse in August 2014, senior R&D management were very skeptical, but there was a lot of support lower in the organization. And that sort of support helped drive us to make the decision to invest in Innosuisse. We have digital healthcare. We invested in 3 companies that ended up being acquired by Roche, which was great. And then targets. Sometimes targets are controversial or questionable, and CD47 is an example of that. We invested in ARCH in 2016 when all of the companies were still preclinical, and generally people were very negative on the target. And as data came in, they went into the clinic, and Gilead ended up buying 47 Inc. in April of last year for $4.9 billion. So clearly, I think most people would say it's a somewhat validated target. People are still waiting for data there. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and leave Roche behind and just talk about the VC's perspective on raising capital. So the first thing I want to ask you is, are you really ready for a VC investment, or is a technology still an idea in someone's head? So the question is, do you want to incubate without incorporation? There are costs to being incorporated. VCs want to see some reduction to practice. And also, for grants, some grants in certain countries like the UK, if you're an academic, you don't have to match it, but you can get grants as a company, but then you have to have VC matching. So sometimes you have access to more money before you get incorporated. So think about that. The next thing people often do is they go to angels, also known as high net worth individuals. And that is very popular here in Switzerland as well, because there are a lot of people in Switzerland who have made a lot of money on biotech investing. This is all fine, but you need to set certain expectations. For example, that further funding will be required, i.e. dilution, and you have to ensure they cannot block further financings. Most sophisticated angel investors, this is not an issue with. For those of you who remember Henry Tremere from Genzyme, he was the biggest angel investor in Cambridge, and he didn't just give money, he gave time as well. So he was a great example of a really helpful angel investor. So when do you start talking to VCs? So you should really start building the relationships, not to get their money, but just to have the relationship. And a good startup will start talking with VCs as early as they can, clearly before they need to raise money. So when you're raising money, you're really looking for that needle in the haystack. And it's a fundraising campaign. You should expect it to take time. 6 to 12 months, that might be a little excessive, but if you think about it in that mindset, it's a lot easier. You should identify funds to target. They're funds that are interested in the area you're working on. For example, don't be afraid if they're already invested in a company similar. For example, degraders. If people are invested in degrader companies, it's because they're interested. They've done a lot of work. If there is a conflict, they will tell you. But if they're otherwise, don't count them out before you actually talk to them. So the other funds are ones that have fresh capital and then can also add value beyond just the money. You should have a good business plan that can stand alone. You can send it to somebody, send your deck to someone, and they can understand it. The other thing that's very useful is that you should be prepared to adapt the business plan based on the feedback from prospective investors. If we give feedback to somebody and they take it in and we see it reflected in the deck, we like that, because we know if they're listening to us now, they'll hopefully listen to us if we invest. A company that doesn't listen to feedback before a VC invests, a VC is not going to be investing. It requires persistence. Fundraising is not easy. So what are we thinking about as we hear your pitch? Science, is it innovative? How much data is available now, and what IP you have? And importantly, is there a killer experiment, and is this included early enough in the plan? We had a company that presented to us last week, and at the end, we were hinting around, and at the end, it was very clear that there was two possibilities. There was clearly a killer experiment they could do. One, they either didn't understand how to structure the experiment, and that could be either because they didn't understand it well enough, or two, because they were so focused on the success that they weren't willing to really be thinking and challenging their own hypothesis. Or secondly, They knew what the killer experiment was, and they didn't want to do it, and they didn't think we were smart enough to figure out what the killer experiment was. Neither of these scenarios is particularly promising for us as investors. And we are likely, we haven't done it officially yet, but we're likely to pass on this because this is really concerning to us. And along the same lines there, one of the other VCs involved said, but you guys would be so good because you could help them design these experiments. That's not our job. We want to invest in somebody who can design it on their own. So the product, does it meet an unmet need? Not for now, but what's going to be there in 5 to 10 years? So when Karsten was talking about Risdiplam, when we entered into that agreement, there was no treatment for SMA. It was actually devastating because when you turn down someone for your clinical trial, and these were all babies under the age of 8 months, the odds are they were going to die if they didn't get in your clinical trial. And that's very, very stressful. And now there are 3 products on the market. So would we invest in another SMA compound now? Probably not, unless it was somehow incredibly differentiated. Target product profile. So to go to the chemistry aspect, we have an investment that is an oncology company, and it's a precision oncology company. And what they're doing is they're looking at targets, and they're coming up with a target product profile for a compound that if they could meet that TPP, that product would not only get approved, but could actually be successful commercially. So they're looking at the competitive market and seeing what is wrong with the products that are on the market and how could they improve them. So this is very early on, before they decide to do any chemistry work, they develop a TPP. And it's very impressive. So the plan, what's your next value inflection point? Are your timelines realistic? Have you thought about the development pathway and the route to regulatory approval? Some of the very novel indications or mechanisms, you may need to do a natural history study to be able to actually get the drug approved. So what else are we thinking about? The team. Look, we understand that teams are sometimes your startup, right? You don't have everything. But what we want you to tell us is, what are you missing? Because what that means to us is that you understand what you're missing. So we want to know that people know what they don't know, if that makes sense. Valuation expectations, are these realistic? This goes to when we're talking about building a syndicate, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. The money to be raised, how much is it to get to the next value inflection point? Because you're going to be raising your next round, and you want to do it at an up round. And how much more money will likely be needed before an exit? So when we're listening to you pitch, we're thinking an exit is either IPO or M&A. That's it. So when would either of those happen? What would be the timing for an acquisition? What would be the timing for an IPO? How much money do you need to get to before that? And we will reserve what we estimate our portion to be of that at the time we make the very first investment. And syndicate, this goes to what the valuation expectations, because if the valuation expectation is too high, then the post money will be too high. And then it'll be harder, it sounds great. Oh, we did a Series A with a 50 million valuation and we raised 25 million, but your post is 75 million. Will you get to a point when you need to raise your next round of financing where 75 million will seem like a good deal and you can raise at 100 million? So there's an upside. This is the thing to remember when you're talking to VCs. Business opportunities are like buses. There's always another one coming. We see a lot of opportunities. We only do 3, 4, 5 investments per year. So don't take it personally. So how do you stand out from the crowd? Positively. Present your story in the time given you. Sometimes that might be 30 minutes, might be an hour, but never run over. Rehearse it, rehearse it, rehearse it. Assume you will get questions. If you get questions and start to run over, please do not say, as one person said to us one time, Well, it's your fault we ran over because you kept asking questions. Don't do that. Be able to convey the value proposition in the first 5 minutes of the presentation. Keep it simple, stupid was a topic, was a theme one time. Tell a story. Focus on a problem and how you are solving it. Pay attention to detail. Don't get caught out. VCs are smart. Crossover investors are even smarter sometimes, and they hire super smart people. So these people will catch you out. Use SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Everybody knows this is what the VCs will be doing themselves. If you do it for them, again, it shows you're thinking about these things. Practice, practice, practice. First impressions are so important. Detailed planning and preparation will pay off. Don't take it personally. You're going to hear no from a lot of people before you hear yes, and learn from the no's. Never assume you really know how the meeting is going. A CEO I know was doing a roadshow for his IPO and was calling on an investor and who is notorious actually for being a difficult person to present to. And they walked in and he started going through his slide deck, and the investor said, "Can you draw the molecule?" And the CEO said, "Well, yes." "Okay, draw the molecule." And so he drew them because the CEO was a chemist, which the investor knew. So he drew the molecule, and they spent the entire presentation discussing the design of the molecule, how they got where they got to with the molecule. And the CEO walked out and told the banker, disastrous. They're never going to invest. And instead, the investor put 10, 20 million into the IPO. What was he trying to accomplish? His goal, he already liked the science. He also liked, the company from that perspective. What he wanted to know was what the CEO was like. So he decided to test the CEO and see how he would respond. Because at the end of the day, we as investors are investing in people. And we're giving you money, we want to feel positive about you. So never assume you know how the meeting is going. What not to say? Our financial projections and timelines are conservative. No, they're not. Almost guaranteed they are not. Just be realistic. We have far more experience about what's going to go wrong. And trust me, something will go wrong. Can we say COVID? The target market for our product is 500 billion worldwide. Maybe, maybe not. But unless you have a fairly expensive consultant's market analysis, it's probably not. Your target market is a market achievable with the resources under your business plan, taking into account both existing and new competition. So we generally have a much better sense of the target market than you guys will have. So be conservative. We will cure cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. Okay. Yes, you might be able to do that, but not on venture money. So a platform company, if you think you can go, for example, the degrader companies, they're mainly focused on oncology, but they also can do CNS. So some of them actually partner the CNS. Focus, focus, focus. This is what the investors want to see. They don't want to see all of this because, if you start hiring development people, you have to hire one for each of these indications. We have no competition. Not knowing or recognizing who and where your competition is a disaster waiting to happen. Somebody presented to us a couple weeks ago that they said there's no drug approved for this product. And I, of course, thought, wait a minute, is that correct? Or sorry, no drug approved for this indication. I thought, is that correct? And yes, it is correct. However, there are 3 phase 3s from 3 different companies waiting for readout. So I would not say that is no competition. Credibility is extremely easy to lose and very difficult, if not impossible, to regain. So now I just want to talk about the process. And whenever you're fundraising and you pitch to someone, you should ask them what their process is. The main thing is they're going to be going through your science and your books with a magnet. So with the magnifying glass. So the due diligence is research and analysis, and it'll be extensive. So how does it start? The VC receives and reviews a non-confidential deck. And I think, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's bring them in for a meeting, or in this case, a Zoom call. The initial presentation is typically 1 to 2 people at the fund. Then there'll be the non-confidential diligence. The VC will talk to KOLs, they'll read publications, they'll dig into all this sort of stuff that they don't need a CDA for this. And then they'll sign a CDA. Now, this can differ among funds. For us, for Roche Venture Fund, the team that's reviewing it actually has to come back to the whole team as a whole to ask for a CDA. Other funds will go to a CDA much quicker. In fact, we'll go into CDA right away because if they think it's interesting, they don't want to waste time without having a CDA. Then there'll be the confidential diligence. And then the presentation to the fund or the partnership. And this is very, very key. Until you make this presentation, you really don't know where you are in the process at the fund. If you have not presented to the management team, to the fund as a whole, they are not in a position to make any decision about whether to move forward with you. Many funds, it require a unanimous approval to move forward. Then they move forward, and then you have the term sheet. Once you have a term sheet is when the IP diligence starts. For IP diligence is more expensive, and no one is going to do that unless they have a term sheet in place. So, and the IP diligence is paid for by the company once if the investors invest, and it's something you can use later on. So when the IP diligence starts, you know you're getting close to the end. The financing documents are actually one of the smallest aspects to all of this. Most of the documents are very, very similar, very standard. In the US, they actually have template forms that were established by the Association of Venture Capital Investing. And it's mostly just the business issues, a lot of which are already set out in the term sheet. So then you close and you get your money. But what happens next? Execute, execute, execute. Do the killer experiment and live with the consequences. Build a good relationship with your investors. Tell your VCs or your investors as soon as you know something is wrong. Do not try to understand it or fix it and then let them know. I have 2 examples. One, CEO, there was an issue. It was a pretty significant issue. As soon as the CEO knew about it, he called each one of the investors, said, I don't understand what's going on. This is, to make a long story short, it ended up being data fraud. But we don't know what it is, but we're trying to fix it. So he was trying to fix it, and at the end of the day, they couldn't fix it, and that was fine. But he let us know right away. Another one, they presented to us, or my team as a whole, at JP Morgan, which is a big investor conference. And after they invested, I said, you know, that's really weird, because I wonder if there's something wrong with their lead program, because they barely mentioned it. They just mentioned it very, very briefly. And then they spent most of the time talking about compounds they were looking at licensing in. So following week, we had a board meeting. 2 hours of toxicology discussions. Every single animal in the preclinical study had died. And, you know, if you think about the 2 of these things, to say the VCs were livid because they had basically presented to all of the investors partnerships the week before, is putting it mildly. So when we have to decide which one of these 2 we're going to co-invest with, or we're going to invest in again, it's going to be the first, not the second. And trust me, we know that things go wrong. Make the right decisions for the programs. Going to backup will delay the program, but it is much better than pouring money into a compound that has issues that you will, at the end of the day, kill it. You know, we see this all the time. We have so much respect for CEOs who will say, we're stopping this. We're proposing to stop this because we think the backup is better. Keep talking to the VCs, especially those who didn't participate. Ask them what they would want to see at the next financing round. Just keep talking to them. Good teams are hard to find. If your company fails because, for example, you did the killer experiment and you did a good job with it, your VCs will back you again. So good luck with the fundraising. And that is the end of my presentation.
Okay, many thanks, Carol. I will now bring Louis back and Karsten. And what we will do now is basically walk through the questions. And if you have follow-on questions on any of these things, just type them in and we see how far we get. Now, the first one is kind of a one to all of you, which is kind of what you need to see on the data. And I guess this is very specific case by case, but what you think there's some generalities when you can engage and when it's too early, or is there no general answer for that? What kind of things you would like to see?
We go early.
Yeah.
And we go earlier probably than partnering and Karsten's teams do. They will sometimes send us stuff. We just did an investment that came in from partnering, where partnering really likes the target, but the company was really early. So they said, you should take a look at this company. So, which is another reason to go to partnering, because even if it's too early for them, they may send it over to us. So, it all depends on the thought, what data they have, data you have, and how thoughtfully you've been working it through.
Yeah, I'll support what Carol said. So don't come to don't think of partnering your product too early. It's also not a favor to you or to your investors, because you're going to, the further you advance your product, the more likely you're going to generate value for you and for your investors. And so take your time, build your data package. Doesn't mean that you do not engage with us. You can have a conversation with us, but don't expect that we are going to partner at a very early stage. So, but it can be, of course, a very good use for a startup to have a conversation with pharma just by listening to our questions. You're getting a bit of free consultancy. So you're getting a lot of, probably you will find the gaps that you need to fill in your data package. And let me give you the classical example is toxicology. So many companies are very, very keen in having a proof of concept in biology. Oh, we've shown this in the lab, in the dish, and then the mice are doing great. But then then there's something that might happen with the mice a couple of weeks later, and then but you haven't monitored it. There are, and then some basic toxicology things that you do in vitro that go a long way for to give confidence to a pharma company. The other thing that has changed a bit in the last few years, and Karsten sort of hinted at it, but let me just be very clear again, is academic collaborations are now firmly in the realm of PRED. So if you are a university and you think you have a good thing where you could collaborate with Roche, go to Karsten. Don't come to me or my colleagues.
And maybe I can just add, and it's something that Carol had said before, it's not only about the data package, it's also about the plans and showing structured thinking, how you want to address, potential gaps, for example. And so also this beyond the data, the forward-looking, showing appreciation of what's needed and what should be done.
A bit a related question, but I mean, obviously these are all data-driven and other kind of decisions, but did it ever happen? Or if something comes in which is kind of a mere idea, but it's so cool that if it works out, it can really be a major shift in whatever they try to accomplish. Is that something you would sometimes be open to back kind of mere ideas with very little? And it goes a bit to that all these discussions on AI, and I know we have some questions there. Obviously, there's a lot of promise there, and many of that one is kind of retrospective analysis of things or other things. So how open are you if the potential is really, really big to sometimes just try it out? Also, if the normal data and things you usually want to see are lacking.
So for us, it goes back to Avexis. when we invest in a company, we have a finite amount of money at risk and a finite amount of FTE support as myself and my colleagues, my team. When partnering or PRED does something very, very early like that, a collaboration, it's a much more intensive process, and they're making much more of a commitment, which is great. And you can see by some of the deals they've talked about, they have done some of these very great deals. But sometimes, so for us, it's a little bit easier. And what we would look for in those cases is we want to co-invest with 2 or 3 other VCs. Because usually these really brilliant ideas, we have one we're going to do now where, we're going to put quite a bit of money in, and yet at the same time, we're going to get to proof of concept in animals in 2 or 3 years. So, we want to be around the table with other people who can continue to invest, because it's going to be a long slog to get in the clinic. So that's kind of what we think about, is very focused on the team in that situation, the quality of the science, and the syndicate that surrounds us.
So on the partnering side, we will always evaluate what is our expertise in-house and what's the expertise that the potential partner can have. So, we can shape the deal depending on the balance of those 2 forces. So take an example where we think the partner has 1 or 2 scientists who are the leaders in the field and have done the work, have spent their last 20 years working on this. We will be very, very keen on maintaining a collaboration with that partner. We won't do a deal where we just bring whatever they invented and take it in-house completely. So in that case, we will want to do a research collaboration, and we will sort of split up the work, and we will do some things, the partner will do others. There will be other cases where we'll say, okay, this is actually a very nice, mature package already, and this is ready to be taken in-house completely. So it varies depending on the balance of expertise between the partner and ourselves.
And maybe if I can just add, depending on the maturity and the promise of the opportunity, of course, you can also envision different collaboration structures, right? So if there's strong interest, but there are also big risks, why not do a pilot study beforehand, or a feasibility study agreement, for example, before actually engaging into a broader collaboration? So there are ways to find out together what the actual promise is.
And there's a question which is basically for the Roche Venture for Carol, but I think it's a question for all of you, and then a related one. What's the best way to get in touch with you? And the related one is maybe, did this really change now if things go fully virtual? And the follow-up on that one is, people always ask, do you read cold emails or not? So maybe the first one to all, what's the best way to get in touch with you? That's for the venture fund, but I think it's for all.
So the secret.
Yeah, kind of.
First name dot last name at roche.com usually works. Now, not with everybody. For example, we have a David Evans on our team, and there is another David Evans who works at Roche, who works in Welland. And so if you send it to david.evans@roche.com, the guy in Welland will get it. He usually sends things on. But other than that, it's and I would leave it to Louis to talk about how partnering, because I think you guys may have a specific mailbox, right?
We do. I'm sorry, I don't know it by heart, but what I will say is, if you are a little bit further advanced in the life cycle of your company, you will probably will be attending one of the partnering conferences. So that's the natural way that you meet people face to face. Once COVID is over, it's going to be really face to face. And otherwise, I think, we are going earlier. Our involvement with Base Launch is yet another way for us to get in contact with you, with the startup candidates. Particularly, I'll say Base Launch is its vocation is for European companies primarily. So we also are involved in other geographies, in the UK and in the US, in other incubators. But for continental Europe, I would say Base Launch is a great way for you. Contact Stefan and his colleagues, Neil and Leo. I mean, they do a great job, not only in triaging and telling you if this is something that could be selected for Base Launch, but if they think, I mean, if they see that your project has promise, they will also give you some mentoring, and then will tell you, go and do these more experiments before you go and present to them. You know, they'll you know, they are also a great platform for startups.
And my email is equally easy to figure out. No, and then on a similar note, did you see any different, like now when everything is virtual, not just like getting in touch, but also like executing on these? For example, I've think the head of Roche Partnering did an interview on how they did the Arrakis deal. They're kind of in the middle, the pandemic started, and they moved fully virtual, and it worked. But do you see any kind of real impact, or is it in your way going as usual, just virtual and not physical? Maybe.
You mean the pace of, or the quantity of deals that we've been doing compared
Yeah,
to
both, and also like more. And then there's another question here which fits into that. How many deals fall apart where everything fits and you start discussing and falls apart? So basically, let's focus it on that one. Once you want to do something and then you try to execute it, do you see a difference from doing this virtually versus meeting the people physically?
Possibly, yes, but I think we've been fortunate enough. I mean, many of us in partnering have been in the space for long enough to know many of the people personally, and if we don't know them personally, somebody at Roche will, and so we will be, I mean, we are able to compensate a bit. So, I mean, do Karsten, Carol, myself, or others, do we talk to each other? Yes. Do we ask, do you trust these guys, or are they mad people? Are they irrealistic? Yes, we sort of cross-reference these things still in this environment, for sure.
Okay, and then let me see it through a bit. Also, I mean, we're trying to focus more on the business-related questions now, and then there's a few scientific ones. But so a question is, how do you adapt with the limited? So I reposted that because it was in the wrong space. How do you adapt with the limited resources of academic or biotech by keeping rigorous scouting? So I think what that question means is, with the limited resources the projects have, how can they pass your bar still? And how can you still engage, knowing that not everything has been done or could have been done, but should have been done because of the limited resources? I think from our side, what we often see is on new targets, like out of academia, you always can find antibodies. But if you go into chemistry, that's actually a pretty hard part to really make good chemistry finance within academia. So how do you see that balance, and how do you deal with that? Or it's just like, not for us too early, we don't care how you got there, but it's just too early?
I think it had been answered a little bit before in context of the data package, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's clear that you cannot expect maybe a full toxicology study from an academic group. I think that's clear to all of us, right? But on the other hand, if you're working on a target and you're pursuing it for CNS disorder, for example, and you should maybe be aware if there's a high expression somewhere else that this could predict, issues and toxicity. So if you show this kind of thinking, this is already helpful quite a bit. Understanding what are close homologs, for example, of your target. Will you run into selectivity issues? So all those questions that can be addressed on a more intellectual level and not on an experimental level. I think if this is well thought through, then this is already a great start.
It goes back, I think, a bit with what Carol said during her presentation, is try to find out what you don't know. So, and whether it's the venture fund or it's partnering, if we get a good feeling that this company at least knows what they don't know and what experiments would have to be done, even if it doesn't have the resources, but if it has a clear idea of what it needs to achieve, then it will already raise the credibility, because then you can get the money. If you can persuade people to say, here's the plan and here's what we need to do to get to a certain stage, then companies will, and it will help if you are in academia and you will probably want to partner, find somebody who has the relevant industry experience that can support you and can become a partner to you or a consultant. There are many ways, but it's good that you associate yourself with people who can complement your expertise with a different type of expertise.
Yeah, a question to Carol, which is not in here, but we often ask, maybe also to Luis and Carsten, but probably to Carol. What do you think business plan versus extended slide is like? Do you need eventually a written out, I don't know, 30-page business plan, or are you fine to go with a good slide deck? And I know different funds think differently, so how you see that.
That's absolutely true. 10 years ago, everybody did very in-depth business plans. Now we generally see slide decks, and then, extensive slide decks, and then we see the raw data. So for the budget, we'll look at it makes more sense for us to look at an Excel spreadsheet than, a business plan document. So we're less fussed about that than we used to be. I think that's one area it's really changed a lot, and that the slide decks are really what people are doing now.
So you're fine.
Yeah, but it is true. Some funds. So when we go forward with approval, we do approval via a slide deck. We used to actually do approvals through a written memo, even though it was internal. And so funds that still have these written memos will want the business plan in writing, so they can just cut and paste it into their approval document, just being totally honest. So there's still some funds that do have that, and so would potentially require something for that purposes. But I think increasingly, I'm actually trying to think of the last time I saw a business plan, and it's been a while.
Yeah, and then you also need to read all of it, right?
Yeah.
A bit more scientific question now on our oral delivery of biologics. There's quite a few questions there. Like, this has been tried for a long time. Also for us, when we see many new projects, they will do an oral insulin, or I don't know what. How do you see the field currently? And do you think it's getting there, or chance from the projects you screen and see? You think it has improved? It has been getting better, or you think people are still trying to crack the problem more basically? Maybe to Carsten.
I think there are clearly promising developments. I don't know, I'm thinking about the large GLP-1 agonist that Novo Nordisk formulated orally by using an enhancer, or a permeability enhancer. There are great examples that work in petri dishes, or maybe in small animals, to get antibodies delivered orally or to intracellular targets. So it's clearly a very interesting niche to follow, yes, and we are having a look at this.
Another more question to you, I would assume, is on oncolytic viruses and your interest in that space. I think we have a question generally there on what you think and your approaches there.
Luis, can you comment, or shall I try?
You can try. I won't make such specific comments in this forum.
I think it really depends on the particular opportunity.
Yeah. So first name, last name at roche.com.
We'll see from there. Okay. There's one, more for us. So I'll just take that one. Do you think that Biotech Startup Studios is a competition for baseline? No, I mean, for us, not. I think it's so difficult to start companies and to run them successfully, and everything is always resource constrained. I think the more the better. I mean, we know them well. We know many others well as well. it goes a bit back to what Carol said. I think what we try to always make people mindful is that if they take on additional investors, to kind of just mind the cap table, to not blow it up early on. And then the same, I mean, we don't do that, we just do convertible loans, but we have a lot of discussions on valuations and so on. And people also always ask us and try to make these NPV calculations and so on. And it goes bit into that one, but I mean, for us anyway, not, but we generally think at this stage of the companies, these calculations are basically wasted time and money, because you can kind of calculate whatever you want. So for us, I mean, coming back, I went a bit outside of that question, but we're very happy to work with others, and we've done that a lot. Because we also know that the amount of funding we provide is for sure not sufficient to go to the finish line. So the more we can work with others, the better. We don't see any competition there. And we have done that in the past, now not with Argo because they're new, but we have one company where there's a fund from the University of Zurich which invested into a company which we also support, which is Innosuisse. So that went perfectly fine. We don't have any problems. It's maybe on our side. Let me see. Oral delivery we had, asking from TTO for. Yeah, I mean, I think we answered that. Preclinical proof of concept requirements. I guess to sum it up, it depends case by case. I think it's hard to answer that more specifically. And then there was a question somewhere, I missed this now, on more the digital part, or let's say digital therapeutics company and all the, let's say, tech companies in drug discovery. I don't know, maybe Carsten, can you more comment on the scientific basis there a bit, and you're interested in maybe there also how you see that space, and is it something in your view which currently has delivered, or you're still waiting, or it's just step-by-step process?
Can you clarify what you mean exactly?
Yeah, so basically there was a question, I missed it now, is your interest in let's say digital drug development or AI in drug development, these kind of companies. I know you touched on that one during your presentation.
Yes, so I mean, AI is such a broad field, right? Or digital, even broader. So yes, we are clearly looking into how which solutions can accelerate the drug discovery process, and there are several levers that you can pull using AI or machine learning predictions. So a lot is really about, so now I'm answering as a chemist, for example, about predicting compound properties, for example. So it really using big data for molecule optimization. So super exciting and interesting stuff, and it's becoming more and more common in projects to use those kind of tools. But then there are other areas like, I don't know, I'm thinking of digital biomarkers, for example, that are completely different, but that are highly explored to, I don't know, to monitor the efficacy of Parkinson treatments, for example, just as one example. So many super exciting areas, yeah, it really touches on all aspects of drug discovery, and we try to use it as good as we can.
Yeah, we are, I mean, just from a partnering point of view, I just want to reinforce, we are very interested and we are very dedicated to this field. PRED has a strong push in the area of neuroscience, for instance, for digital biomarkers. And in partnering, we have a dedicated group of people to screen for digital opportunities and personalized healthcare. So yes, we can only encourage, if people have good ideas, reach out to us. It is a field that we're interested, and we already have invested, and we are already invested in this space.
Maybe a completely other angle. We have quite many questions I've seen on how to get started working with either venture fund or Roche partners, or more in these kind of roles. What's the way to start if you are coming from the outside to move into Roche partnering or the external innovation or the venture fund? I don't know, maybe Carol, do you want to take it first?
Start with that. We have, as you saw from our org chart, we have, I think, 6 people right now. Partnering has what, 100? 80?
Yeah,
100 people?
Yeah, of which maybe I would say 10 to 15 are almost exclusively dedicated to triaging things, and then another 30 are sort of in the background following up to take projects a bit further. So we do have more resources than Carol, and so we are independent. So Carol and partnering are the venture fund and partnering are two different groups of within Roche, and there is nothing to stop candidates, companies to talk to both, and then we can also direct you to which one we think is more, there is a vocation more for the venture fund or more for partnering.
Yeah, and partnering, if it's somebody who's mainly looking for investing, partnering can often take a quick look at it and then send it to us with their kind of initial take on the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily make our decision for us. The head of partnering once sent us something with, by the way, I think these targets are crap. And we ended up still doing the investment.
Carol, is it fair to say, I mean, as a rule of thumb, that if it's at earlier stage, it will probably be the venture fund, and if it's a bit more mature, it will be partnering. Yeah, just as a general rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have, let's say, if you have a platform, a discovery platform that you think is really promising, then it could be something that our technology group within partnering would look at, and then would, reach out to Karsten and his colleagues, and there are many. It's a bit case by case, but as a general rule of thumb, I would say, if it's academics, then go to Karsten. If it's early stage startups, go to Carol, and if it's a bit more mature, then come to partnering. Just a rule of thumb.
And turning it around, we have a question on out-licensing, how to learn about. So it was, how can we learn about the compounds that are available for out-licensing? This is mainly to you, Luis.
That's a good question. I don't know if we put advertisements on newspapers or so. I think not. But our colleagues are so our sell side group in partnering. They do attend the partnering conferences. So first thing probably is you identify who are the people who are responsible for out licensing, and then get to meet them at partnering conferences. Or if you know their names, you now know the secret about the email addresses. You can always try your luck and invite them, pay them lunch or something. Who knows? You might be lucky.
Okay, then I think we have talked about the AI in drug discovery. Just a very concrete plan. Question to you, Carol. Do you plan to have more investments similar? And this is not AI in drug discovery. Do you plan to have more investments similar to Flatiron as an example?
Okay, so we have done similar to Flatiron. It's a little tough right now because most people don't want us to invest because we're viewed as a competitor. So if it's a direct competitor to Flatiron, it would probably not be okay. We do focus a lot on AI for diagnosis, and so we do look at that. We have 2 people on our team who spend a fair amount of their time looking at AI, what we call AI companies or digital healthcare. And for example, we're invested in Freenome, which is a blood test for colorectal cancer, and they have a 25,000 patient clinical trial ongoing right now, which is just another little message. Is just because it's digital doesn't necessarily mean it's not a lot of work and money to get to where you want to get. But there are also a lot of companies that are focused, or VCs that are more focused on that, like Google, GV, which is the old Google Ventures. Andreessen Horowitz is A16, I think, that we've co-invested with, that are they're also very focused on that as well. And they sometimes can provide a lot of resources to help. And from a digital perspective, we can provide more of the therapeutic side. Somebody once asked us when they was presenting to us, instead, have you thought about hiring a CMO? And the guy said, a chief marketing officer? It's like, no, a chief medical officer. So you need for if you're in AI, you really digital healthcare. You need both the digital and the healthcare investors, ideally.
So you think that culture still sometimes a big clash on digital versus IT, although people are in it since a while? Basically, or the other way to ask that, you think there are still these people from tech which don't know the healthcare and the other way around? Do you think that's still an issue sometimes in these companies? Yeah.
Which one was that for?
Oh, well, the question was basically like, so you think there's still this clash of, let's say, two different areas, one is tech and one is healthcare, that, and there's still people come from tech into healthcare and from healthcare into, or more tech into healthcare, which don't realize that much how different the products are. You still see this issue.
Absolutely.
Another one
is the whole regulatory environment is very foreign to the tech world. And we're investors in 23andMe. And for those of you who remember when FDA just got really, really mad at 23andMe and took them off the market. And part of the reason they were really mad at them was because 23andMe never responded to their emails. Never responded to them. Okay. And we're like, you didn't respond to them? How do you not respond to the FDA? And they're like, well, the FDA, who cares? You know, so not, they didn't say that, but it was just a different mindset. And you said, and trust me, 23 is not like that anymore. That was a long time ago. And the person who was running the regulatory had left, and it just sort of got lost.
Okay, another one, we covered the kind of what data you want to see, but there's a question more to all of you. In which format and detail do you want to see? Basically, the question is, how would you want to see the data organized for due diligence? I think that's the way to ask.
So the process, I mean, the usual process we have is, you know, non-confidential deck. Mm-hmm. And part of the non-confidential deck can also be a teaser to say, here's the data we would be showing. You can give the headline, here's what we would be showing you if we went into confidential discussions. And after that, typically, I mean, if you've generated a large enough package that you think warrants, you know, that big pharma looks at it and does a proper due diligence with a group of different scientists, then you will be doing a data room. So you will be putting up, you would make the data available to the lab, basically the lab books, the single data, the source where you've registered all your experiments and your results, etc., and the charts and everything. But that serves also as a warning that you know, there is a certain point at which all of these processes are justified, and think carefully when you are at that point. So don't waste your credibility away by trying to do something like that too early. Be mindful about that, and, you know, again, draw a feeling for that by talking to people you know in the industry or who have worked in industry. You know, there are many ways to get the sense whether you are, or talk to Stefan in base launch. I mean, there are many ways to find, you know, when is the right time to approach the industry for partnering.
I mean, on the approach, and just kind of, someone said they did send you a request to the main address of Roche Partnering, and they received the response rapidly. So this is working. Just to the one of you who tried to get in touch, it works by just sending an email and waiting for the reply. Let me see now. Another one is, no, I'm the wrong one there. There is one bit for us, but also for you, if you will. If we have already applied to baseline, should we wait for a response before contacting Roche directly? I would say no. Definitely not. But you can. I mean, there's no answer to that one. Okay. Yeah. What would you want to be? I think this we covered. What would you consider to be a good path to start working as part of Roche Partnering or the Roche Venture Fund? I think we briefly touched on that one, but then we kind of deferred it a bit into more how to get in touch with you. Like career advice, maybe is the right question to ask this one. Carsten, so for you, I guess for the External Innovation Group, it comes with the, let's say, first scientific work and Roche, but maybe you can comment on that on the way into that one, and then we can move to the others.
Yes, as you said, I mean, I had a scientific role before and then transitioned into this external innovation role by initially, I was working quite closely with some platform technologies that we use in the peptide space and got interested in technology scouting to expand on those activities, etc. And then discovered that this entire area is super interesting and decided to fully focus on this. So this was more a, internal transition into this role, but maybe Carol and Louis can answer their perspective.
Carol?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I have anything to add to what Carsten said. I mean, right now, in terms of our team, we're, I'm not going to add anything more right now. Thanks.
Louis, you want to add anything?
I'm not completely sure I understood the question, but I'll make
the question
general
is how to find a job in Roche Partnering. And to sum it up.
I mean, we do have Trelio. We're not, the venture fund's not hiring right now, but we do have Trelio at Roche, which does apply. And generally the best way to get it at Roche is fairly, I think it's Trelio. Roche has a very extensive application thing, but we're focused more on hiring junior people and then hopefully building them up. And Louis, I'll let you comment on partnering.
Sure. So I'm going to make more general comments. So of course we do post things on the website. As in everything in life, it also helps if you know people in the company. It can never do any harm, and network as much as you can. Maybe what will be helpful for people is also to understand the general profile of people who work in partnering. The vast majority of people have a scientific background, either if it's an undergraduate degree or a PhD, or some people have been scientists for longer. Some of them are interested in business too. It's not and have a business degree. Myself, I started being a chemist, so I did a PhD in organic chemistry, and then I decided I wanted to be in business as well. So I did an MBA, but many people learn all of these things as they go along in the professional life. So it's not, you don't need to tick all the academic boxes. You can, as long as you're interested and you're keen in learning, that's the very, very important, and especially in partnering, because you are covering, and the way we are set up at Roche specifically, one person can work on many different projects in different areas. So we have moved away a bit from having specialists in one area and who only do partnering deals in one particular area to more generalists. So to be intellectually interested is kind of one of the main conditions. We tend to look for people who have some previous experience, be it as a scientist or in some field of the industry. And say, for instance, some of my colleagues were postdocs at Roche or came as postdocs, and they start at a relatively junior position within partnering, and then they move up as they gain experience, and they understand the other skills that you need to develop beyond the academic and scientific skills. You need to be good at managing people without having a direct leadership. So because you work cross-functionally with scientists and so on, the scientists report to other more senior scientists. They don't report to a business development person, but you need to sort of motivate the scientists to be involved in assessing a partnering project as well, and to participate in the whole process of assessing, and then to stay involved if we do a deal to run the research project or the collaboration as well. So it's, it spans across this whole, skill set.
Okay, many thanks. Let's do one more question, then we can give people some time to network if they want. So that one is, how would you integrate a new startup once you agree on a partnership, and or once you have acquired, invested in? So basic is kind of the post-deal thing, but let's split it up first. How would Roche integrate a company that acquires, and then maybe we can talk about not really integrating, what, like running partnerships. I don't know. Yeah.
So, of course, we have a very proud tradition of doing acquisitions and keeping the companies independent, but this is not the only way that we acquire companies. So we also acquire certain companies when, say, there is only one asset, and typically the companies that we will acquire and keep as independent entities are companies which have a proven track record and expertise in a particular area of discovery, and where we draw, big confidence that it will be able to maintain it if it stays as an independent entity. There is also a geographic aspect to this. So if a company is rooted in one of the hotspots of a particular field, it is immediately increasing its chances of staying independent within the Roche group. Say, for instance, when we acquired Spark Therapeutics, we know that Philadelphia and UPenn are very strong in gene therapy. So, for us, it was important to maintain our presence there and to strengthen, to have a strong foothold in one of the hotspots for gene therapy. And I mean, Genentech speaks for itself, but it was back then in the day, it was a pioneer in the Bay Area. And, nowadays, it's still the anchor. If you have been to San Francisco and to South San Francisco, you sort of see, it's interesting. You sort of see Genentech, and then dozens of companies around Genentech, which are sort of, and then you really feel. I mean, if you see a satellite picture on Google, you will see it's like the big one, and then the satellites around it, and it is a bit the cluster effect.
Great, many thanks. Anyone want to add something? Then maybe we can turn to the second part of that question, then close it, which is kind of the post-deal thing on partnering.
Actually, I would add something there for partnership. We have a whole group of people who are responsible for managing the partnership. So we very actively manage, and we set up. We are very sensitive to trying to make the partnership look well. And there's always a point person who's your main point of contact into Roche, that's their full-time job, is to be managing collaborations. So.
And maybe I can add from the discovery side. I think there are examples of partnerships where there's more a clear cut on the time axis, so that there's a defined handover point, right? So where the partner works quite independent until molecules identified, until there's a clinical candidate identified, and then there's a clear handover to Roche. And there are other examples with really joint project teams. So I had mentioned the Reverie collaboration on AI discovery of kinase inhibitors, and there's really a joint project team working really together to advance this program. So there are several scenarios possible.
Okay, many thanks. I think with that we went through most of the questions. So thanks a lot for your time. For the other ones who want to still network, I think if you click on networking, then you will go into a networking area where you will be automatically matched with someone else. So feel free to try that out. From our side, that's about it. So we just have one thing. We will, just informed by Leonid, who is helping us with the event, we will do a survey. So I will just put the link into the Q&A. I've done it now, so feel free to click on that link. Then you can fill out, I think it's 7 questions. From our side, just one more thing, or 2 more things actually. We are now actually very actively looking for new projects. So if anyone has something, just feel free to get in touch. And actually, probably next week, from our side, we are actually hiring. So we will stay tuned, but we can publish and we will advertise a position or 2 next week, probably. So that's all on our homepage. So that's from us. So many thanks to Carol, Luis, and Carsten for your time. It was very interesting. And I'm happy that we managed to do this virtually without any major crashes. At least that's what I'm not aware of anyone. So thanks a lot for your time, and have a nice evening. And the others from non-European countries have a nice. Okay,
Thank you very much.
You.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.